Hello, hello. I'm Andrew Brokos. You may know me as one of the co-hosts of the Thinking Poker podcast. You may know me as the blogger behind the Thinking Poker blog. You may be familiar with my videos on Tournament Poker Edge or my videos on Red Chip Poker. If you're really old school, maybe you've even seen my videos on Poker Savvy Plus. You may know me as a columnist for 2+2 magazine. This video is designed to be a demonstration for my latest coaching offering, which have some similarity to the videos that I've made for instructional sites, but are customized and personalized, which means that these are going to be videos created specifically for you. You'll be the only one to see your video. It's going to be based on hands that you send to me, and that means it's going to be tailored to your needs, to the situations that you find yourself in, and to hands that you've actually played in situations that are actually giving you difficulty. And that's what makes these a cost and time effective way of improving your game. It's cost effective because it's quite a bit less expensive than my usual one-on-one coaching, and it's time effective because rather than watching a video that may or may not be relevant to you, this is a video that's guaranteed to be useful to you. In a moment, we're going to see an example video that I made for one of my coaching students, but I do want to tell you what I think are some of the advantages of the custom video review. The biggest one is that you're going to discover leaks that you didn't know you had. The idea here is that you'll send me maybe a hand history from a tournament, a hand history from a cash game session that you played, or just a database of hands that you've played if you want me to review your statistics and also look at some specific hands. And I'll be able to point you to issues that you didn't even realize you were having. So rather than sending specific hands that you think you maybe didn't play well, this is an opportunity for me to get a broader snapshot of your game and identify some things that you might not even realize that you needed to work on, or some situations that you didn't know you were missing. This means that the strategy advice is going to be tailored specifically to your needs. Make sure that the time that you spend watching videos is focused on things that you really need to be working on. In my opinion, the subscription to pretty much any video training site, certainly the ones that I work for, is a really good value in terms of money. And the real thing that keeps me from watching a lot of poker videos is not that I can't afford to watch a lot of poker videos, as much as it is that I just don't have time to watch all the poker videos in the world. So if you fall into that same boat, I think custom videos are a really good way for you to make sure that you're getting the most out of your studying time. You're also going to get a customized course of study. So after I identify some things that you need to work on, I'm going to suggest both some exercises that you can do, and I'm going to suggest some things that you can work on while you play. And I'll probably even suggest some videos or some books or some articles that would be good for you to read and think about as well. And let's not forget, #Knitcast, that this is a pretty significant discount from my regular coaching. If you're interested, and if you're interested in finding out how much it costs, I'm not mentioning it here not to be shady, but just because it may change from what it is right now. So you can find the latest information about availability of custom videos and how to sign up for this or for any of my other coaching packages by going to start off at thinkingpoker.net. You click here on coaching. This will bring you to the coaching page. There's a link down here for customized video reviews, also some of the other programs. At the time of the recording of this video, there's custom coaching, crushing live cash games, dominate donkiments if you're interested in actual one-on-one coaching where we get together over Skype. But for customized video reviews, you can click here on this link or learn more. And this will lay out, so these are the current prices on these packages, and again, this is subject to change, so do be sure that you check out this site before you just assume that this is what the price is. But at the time that I'm making this video, this is the current price. And you can see that this is at $100 an hour is about half the price of my custom coaching, which is $200 an hour. So you could request more info, or you could register now. And there's a little form for you to fill out. Tell me a bit about yourself, what you're interested in. I'll write back to you by email, and we'll get everything set up, and you can have a video review like the one that you are about to see. So what you're going to see is an example about 1 hour of what you could expect. This is a real video review that I did for one of my students. In general, these video reviews are not going to be released to the public, so this is an exception. This player gave me permission to do this for promotional purposes so that you all can see an example of what we're talking about. Otherwise, ways to get an idea of what my coaching is like. You can always listen to the Thinking Poker podcast if you want to hear me discuss individual hands in isolation. I think that watching my videos on Tournament Poker Edge is a pretty nice way to get an idea of how I teach poker. And for those of you, if $100 an hour seems a little steep for your budget, watching my videos on Tournament Poker Edge is certainly a more economical way of doing that. The videos tab here on my Thinking Poker podcast will bring you to a link. Follow this, and you'll end up at Tournament Poker Edge, where you can sign up to watch some of my videos, and that can give you a better idea as well as to what you might expect from my coaching. Okay, enough promotional stuff. You can enjoy the video, and if you find it useful, then I will look forward to hearing from you to have some custom videos created for you. All right, we want to begin our analysis by looking for where the problem is. Where is it that you're losing money? So we're looking at about 55, 56, 91 hands that you've played since December 1st, 2014. And you've got a negative 10 big blind per 100 win rate. So the good news is a lot of room for improvement here, and we want to see where is it that you're losing that money. It's a little trickier than just looking here and seeing where are the red numbers, because you're actually doing okay from the small blind and the big blind. There might be room to do a little bit better there, but the baseline for the small blind is not 0. It's in fact negative 50. That's what would happen if you just folded every time you were in the small blind. You would lose half a big blind every hand, because that's what you have to post. Same thing in the big blind, you'd negative 100 is the baseline. So you're actually recovering 20 some big blind per 100. You're improving your outcome relative to folding by playing some hands from the small blind. And here in the big blind, again, you're improving your outcome by about 46 big blind per 100 by playing hands out of the big blind. It may be possible to do a bit better than this, but these are actually not a big concern. The single biggest concern, I would say, is probably early position here, the negative 13.51, right? It's a negative number, and it's a relatively large negative number. But I also think the button actually is a bit of a concern. The button has the potential to be much higher than this. I think this could easily be in the 20s, if not the 30s. And so, you're actually, in some sense, you're kind of losing more here on the button than you are here in early position, or at least there's potentially more room for improvement here on the button than there is from early position. So I kind of want to focus most on those two spots. Middle position and cutoff, I think you've got reasonable win rates. Not to say that there's no room for improvement, but probably a lot of the mistakes that you're making in these other positions are also mistakes that you're making in middle position and cutoff. So to some extent, they'll probably fix themselves. But this is usually where I start my analysis, is looking at the big blind per 100 and trying to see what your win rate looks like and where the money is going. And we'll use some filters in a moment to see if there are some specific situations where you're losing money in a certain pre-flop action, for instance. We'll come back to that in a moment. Other things that I want to look at are the VPIP, and what we'd like to see here is a nice smooth progression, at least from early position to button. So we've got you playing about 17% of hands in early position, and should be the same kind of smooth progression for pre-flop raise, where you play a few more hands from each position relative to the previous one. So one thing that's jumping out at me is that your VPIP and your pre-flop raise are not equal to each other in early position. This would seem to imply that you're sometimes limping into the pot rather than raising. I think that in a six-handed game, that doesn't ever really make sense. I think you should probably just raise every time that you're in early position. I suppose the other thing that's possible here is if you have a few full ring hands, where there's more than 6 people at the table mixed in with your six max hands, it's lumping everything together in early position. So it's possible it's not that you're limping, but rather that there's a few hands where somebody raised under the gun at a 9-handed table and you called under the gun +1. I think that could also show up here. So I'll just make the point. I don't think you should ever really limp into the pot. If you're going to play the hand, just raise it, and if you're not going to play the hand, then I would fold it. At a 6 max table, I don't ever really make exceptions to that. There are some occasions where I'll limp at a full ring table, although I've been doing less of that lately as well. I think these two numbers probably should just be equal to each other. I also think the 17% is probably a little bit high from the early position. Let's actually pause for a second and look at what exactly 17% is going to look like. So I've got Slice opened up here, and you can see I'm showing what it considers to be the top 17% of hands. This may not be exactly the range that you're looking at, but regardless, I'll make a couple of suggestions here. I think that these kind of junky offsuit hands are not great from these kind of like offsuit Broadway hands are pretty tough to play from early position. So I think I would fold most of those. I think King Queen off and Ace Jack offsuit are okay, although even those I don't think it's too profitable to play those. You could maybe even experiment with folding these if you're struggling in early position and they're kind of marginal. Even if you play them well, you might be better off just not playing them at all. I also think like I wouldn't be playing these hands. You may not be either. I probably would actually play all of the pocket pairs. I think these are somewhat easier hands to play from out of position because you can do a kind of a no set, no bet sort of strategy. I don't know that all of the suited aces are going to be playable from early position either. There's actually more room to play these, I think, when you're deep. So the deeper you get, the more inclined I'm going to be to fold like the King Jack offsuit, the Ace 10 offsuit. If you get up to like 200 big blinds deep, and other people at the table are that deep as well, you might. I mean, there's more of a case for folding like the Ace Jack offsuit and the King Queen offsuit because those hands just get less and less valuable. And there's a little bit more of a case for playing the suited aces. But for now, I would probably even advise you just to stay away from a lot of these small suited aces. I think they're probably not doing you a lot of good in early position. I do like the suited Broadway hands. Queen 10 suited is maybe the exception here, and I think we probably want to err on the side of tightening up your early position range, given that you are having some difficulty there. So I would suggest for now just playing this this range of hands and see what kind of results you get from that. As I said, even the King Queen offsuit, the Ace Jack offsuit, maybe even the King 10 suited are a little bit borderline. So you could consider folding those as well, but this is going to get your pre-flop raise down more in the 12 to 13% neighborhood, and I think that'll be better. And again, no limping in here. So experiment with just raising with these hands. The size I don't think is terribly important. I think anywhere from 2 to 4 big blind is fine. Just be consistent about it. Don't raise different amounts with different hands. So whatever you decide is going to be your early position opening size, you should do it with any hand that you raise from early position. Don't switch it around. But I don't think it matters too terribly much whether you do 2 or 4. In very loose games, I suppose erring on the larger side is better. So if you find a lot of your opponents are very loose pre-flop and you are playing a pretty tight pre-flop range, I would probably go for 4 big blind per 100. For 4 big blind opens. So that's a suggestion. That's a kind of a starting point for early position. As you improve, you might find that you want to add a few more hands back in. But given the win rate that you have there right now, I would say start off with this pretty tight opening range and go from there. So that's the first thing that jumped out at me. Middle position, we've got you raising 18.5, and you've got a pretty narrow calling range here, which that seems okay. You shouldn't often be calling raises from the early position player, especially when your position is so bad. But it seems like you're doing that with a pretty small range of hands, so that's generally fine. The 18.5 could again be a little high here. Let's see what exactly that might look like, and that's not even your. I guess we actually want to look at your raise first in from middle position, which is 20%. So here's maybe a rough estimate of hands that you're playing from middle position right now. Again, I think all the pocket pairs belong in. I still don't think Ace 9 offsuit is too useful. I would get rid of Queen 10 off, maybe even King 10 offsuit. Queen Jack offsuit, not too great. Yeah, again, let's, your middle position results were actually okay, but I still think it might be a good idea to err on the side of being tighter from the beginning. I think we can throw in a few more suited connectors now. The suited aces become a little bit more playable. Ace 5 suited is arguably better than like Ace 7 suited and Ace 6 suited because it has a little more potential to make a straight. So I could see a range looking something like this. Again, this is a little tighter than what it seems like you're playing right now, and I think that's probably a good idea. Even though we didn't see problems really in your middle position raising range, or your results were in pretty good shape there, I still think you may improve your results by tightening up a bit. If you're having problems in early position, I would think a lot of those same problems are applying in middle position as well. So that's what I'm going to suggest to you for a middle position range. The cutoff, we've got you opening, and there's not much of a jump here really for you between your raise. Well, no, I guess there is actually. If we look at raise first in, there is kind of a jump from 20% middle position to 27% in the cutoff. We'll see what that looks like, but 27% actually seems like a reasonable number to me for the cutoff. So if we bump this up to, for some reason it's not settling at 27, it's jumping. There we go. Okay, well. So if we do this, that's 27%. Let's see. I don't think these suited kings are going to be real useful to you, or the suited queens. The one gappers actually have a little more value to them. Some of the bigger cards kind of playable. I think queen jack offsuit is good from this position. I still wouldn't play these real weak ones. I want more suited connectors in there now. And some of the gappers. This looks pretty good to me. And so this is like 23% rather than your 27%. I think all the suited aces are playable now at this point. This is probably pretty good for this position. So we've got you tightening up just a hair from the cutoff. And your win rate in the cutoff is good. I do think it could probably be better. So try tightening up a little bit. I think we're probably just going to tighten you up a little bit from all of those positions. The one where we see a really big jump is on the button. So your raise first in is almost double on the button what it is on the cutoff. And no, there should be a big jump here. I mean, the button is a noticeably better position than the cutoff is, but I still think that's that's probably overdoing it a little bit. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was actually recording. I think that you're probably playing too many hands on the button, trying to steal with too many hands on the button, and I'm going to guess that has a lot to do with what we're seeing here, with you not having as high of a big blind for 100. There may be other things that you're doing, but I think probably tightening up on the button is going to do a lot to help you. And actually, to jump ahead a little bit, if these two numbers here are how often you fold to 3-bets after raising. So if you raise pre-flop and then fold to a 3-bet by a player who's out of position against you, which on the button they always are, you're folding 80% of the time that you get 3-bet. And that's okay if your opponents very rarely 3-bet and they just always have extremely strong hands when they do it. But anyone who 3-bets more aggressively out of the blinds, and that really is not an uncommon thing. Certainly not if you're playing as high as $50 a dollar. I think you're going to see that. But I imagine even at smaller stakes than that, there's people who understand this concept of 3-betting against button steals. So basically you're just giving money away to people who 3-bet you. And the solution to that is not necessarily to start 4-betting more or to start calling more 3-bets, although there may be room for that. Like this here is your 4-bet. Your 4-bet on the button is only 2% compared to these other positions. Now, part of that is that you're raising more weak hands from the button in the first place. But I mean, my point is that you're folding really often to 3-bets when you open on the button, and the solution is not necessarily to start calling more 3-bets, but just to start raising fewer hands so that you don't find yourself holding a weak hand facing a 3-bet as often. So let's look at maybe what your button range ought to look like. Right now it's at 54%, somewhere in that neighborhood. It's probably not this exact 54%, but I'm going to give you an idea of what I think it should look like. So I still think the junky king's not too great. And the thing is, if you were winning on the button, like I think the button is probably more dependent on skill than a lot of these other positions, because so many of these hands are sort of pretty marginal. So the more that you can handle marginal situations well, the more you can squeeze a little bit more value by playing some of these pretty bad hands. But if you're not winning on the button, which right now you barely are, I think you're probably better off just not playing some of these tougher to play hands. So I think we can really tighten you up pretty considerably here. I also think that big cards to a large degree matter more than like suitedness and connectedness. There's a few exceptions in here, but in general, we still want to focus on playing big cards. Like when you raise your button and you're called by someone out of the blinds, pretty often the best hand is going to be one pair, and sometimes it'll even just be a high card like ace high or something. So even this, which I think this is a pretty wide range, and this is 44%. So this has you trimming some fat off of your button raising range. It still has you playing quite a few hands on the button. I wouldn't be surprised if there's even more room to tighten up than this, but this by itself, I think, is probably enough. If you start tightening up some on the button, I think that's going to help you, and now you won't have quite as many problems when you get 3-bet. You can use your HUD if you find that you have a reliable 3-bet statistic on someone. If you see that the players in the blinds don't 3-bet very often, then you can. I think this is a good range to use. If you find that you do have a very aggressive 3-better in the blinds, then you might want to fold some of the worst hands that are here on this list. So in terms of pre-flop opening ranges, I think that's hopefully you'll find that helpful. And I think just tightening up, playing, what are we doing, like 10 to 20% fewer hands from every single one of these positions, I think that's going to be a good start for you. I'm not going to look as much at the blinds because it's a little harder. I mean, so what I'm talking about here is raising first in situations where everyone has folded in front of you and you have the option to raise. Those ranges that I just gave you, that's what we're looking at. It's harder to do this out of the blinds because it's going to depend on the size of the raise that you're facing, whether or not you should be calling from these positions. I will say I'm not a big fan of cold calling out of the small blind, which it seems like you are doing. I think that most of the time that you play a hand in the small blind, you should either re-raise or fold. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think you need a pretty good reason to call here in the small blind. Like basically you should just decide, I think I'm ahead of this guy's range, so I'm going to raise, or I don't think I'm ahead of his range, therefore I'm going to fold. I don't think you should call and just try to get a piece of the flop. The big blind's a bit more of an exception to that because sometimes people make very small raises and you're getting pretty good odds to call. And as I say, I mean, it's a little more situational here, depending on like the size of the raise that you're facing and the position that it's in. So I'm not going to do the same thing for the blinds that I did for these positions, but I do think tightening up, and it's possible that tightening up a bit in the blinds as well will be good for you. 3-betting seems okay. The one thing that's kind of jumping out at me here is that you're 3-betting more in middle position than you are in the cutoff, and that doesn't really make sense. It shouldn't. I mean, it should be kind of tough to 3-bet early position openers. Let's actually see. Can we add more players? Okay, I couldn't add more players on Slice, but I realized there's an equity calculator here on Poker Tracker that I can use. So if we're talking about, we want to look at 9% of hands that you're 3-betting against an early position open. I mean, this is 9% of hands. This might not be the exact 9% of hands that you're 3-betting, but I think that a lot of these hands are not going to be great for 3-betting. So probably I would say as a default, like this. I mean, I think when you're in middle position against an early position open, you really can't 3-bet very much. I think this would be my default, would be just to 3-bet only these hands. And then there's a few that I would call with. Like I think that the pocket pairs are probably all going to be good calls against an early position open, and like ace jack suited, king queen suited. I might just call with those and fold everything else. So I think that this is only 4.2%. I think that you probably want to 3-bet a little bit less in middle position than you currently are. And that shouldn't translate into more calling. It should translate into more folding. Early position raises are pretty strong, and when you yourself are in pretty early position, you really don't want to put money in, because even if you call now, you might get squeezed by somebody behind you. Other people might come in behind you for calls, and then you have to play a hand out of position without the betting impetus. It's really tough to play in middle position facing an early position raise, and I think just probably folding more than you currently are is going to be a good idea. So this is, I mean, I really would not 3-bet too much more than this against an early position open. Yeah, I think the problem here really is more that your middle position range is too wide rather than that your cutoff range is too narrow. I still think the cutoff is going to have the same problems. If you're facing an early position raise, I wouldn't really 3-bet any more hands than I would 3-bet from middle position. If you're facing a middle position raise, I suppose that you could add in maybe like ace jack suited, king queen suited, ace jack off, pocket tens, about like this. So you can 3-bet a few more hands against a middle position opener, maybe, and it could depend a little bit on the player, but I don't want you to be looking for excuses to do it. I think you should be folding a lot when you're in middle position. You should not often be calling a raise. And to be fair, it seems like you're not. Your pre-flop raise and your VPIP this is probably the best ratio of any position is here in middle position. So I think, and I doubt it's a surprise that your middle position win rate is probably the best also, right? Even though it's lower than the cutoff, I think the cutoff has more room for improvement than the middle position does. So I wouldn't worry too much about the middle position play. I think you're in pretty good shape there. We were talking about the cutoff though, because I was saying you do want to 3-bet a little bit less from middle position, I think, and fold a little bit more. So from the cutoff, you can maybe 3-bet a few more hands if the opener is middle position, but should look pretty similar. Do have a bit of a gap now between the pre-flop raise and the VPIP, and you may be calling a little too much in the cutoff. We'll figure that out in a moment. The button, again, you could be calling a little too much. We already talked about tightening up in terms of raising fewer hands on the button. I would guess that you probably don't want to call as many raises as you currently are on the button either. This is a pretty significant gap between pre-flop raise and VPIP. I think you might want to do something about that. So let's actually look at let's use some filters and try to see if we can tell a little bit more about where this money is going. So let's start by looking at instances. As I've suspected that calling raises is part of your issue here. So let's look at a filter where you called a raise. The good thing is we're only seeing 205 hands here. So you haven't been doing a lot of calling, which is good. You've been doing most of your calling out of the big blind, which is correct. This is when you're closing the action, you're getting good odds, and those are two pretty strong arguments for calling. The button, I think you're doing too much calling. Just looking at this, so you've limped 3 times in early position. I would just take that down to 0, but that's not too big of a deal. Haven't called terribly many raises from middle position or cutoff. The button is where I'm seeing a lot of calling and also where we're seeing a lot of losing. But it's worth pointing out, even middle position and cutoff, you're losing money on your calls. It's over a small sample, so it could just be a bad beat or something. But I think it's telling that all 3 of these positions, when you call raises, you're losing money with them. I'm not sure what happened here in early position. We're only looking at a sample size of 3, so it seems like maybe you limped, called a raise, flopped a set, and won a big pot or something like that. But I think this is really just noise. This is variance. We're still not looking at a large sample, but I think given that you are losing in all 3 of these positions, and it was already kind of my hunch that calling too many raises was going to be an issue for you, I think that's probably part of the issue. Now let's look a little bit more here. Your fold to continuation bet number. When you call a raise in middle position, you folded 100% of the time to a continuation bet. Again, we're looking at a small sample, but in the cutoff, you're folding 70% of the time. Even 50% is honestly a little high, right? If your opponent raises pre-flop and then bets half the pot, he only needs you to fold 1/3 of the time to show a profit. So if you fold 50% of the time, certainly if you fold 70% of the time, you're basically just letting him print money with his continuation bets. And as we saw with the 3-betting, the solution here is not necessarily to call more continuation bets. It may be to fold more often pre-flop so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're facing a continuation bet and you're holding a pretty weak hand. The way I like to think about calling is that when you call, you are preparing to play post-flop and you're preparing to face a continuation bet. So before you call pre-flop, you need to have a plan for facing a continuation bet, and you need to know that one of 2 things is true. either you're going to be able to call a continuation bet very often, like a lot of flops. So this, if you have a good pocket pair, you have a big Broadway cards where you can potentially call even unimproved on some flops. Those are the kinds of hands that might be able to call maybe like really good suited connectors if you're going to float. If you have a lot of gut shots, anytime you get like any little piece of the board you're going to float, that has some potential. But you need to be prepared to continue very frequently when you call pre-flop. Or you need to be able to, if you don't continue very often, you need to be able to win really big pots the times you do continue really often. And that that second type of hand is really only pocket pairs. Those are the only hands that flop well enough to justify folding like 80% of the time to a continuation bet, because you can win so much when you hit. You really can't get away with trying to play suited connectors the same way, just saying I'm going to call a raise with 8-7 suited and see if I can flop two pair. It's much harder to flop two pair than it is to flop a set. So I really am not a fan of trying to play any other sort of hand fit or fold. A pocket pair is really the only one that you should be doing that with. Anything else, you need to be able to continue pretty aggressively on the flop. And by aggressively, I just mean often. Like you should not call with the plan of folding 70% of flops, which seems to be what's happening here in the cutoff, because people are going to continuation bet pretty frequently, and when they do, you're giving them away money, and clearly you're not making up enough money the times that you do call their continuation bet. You're not making enough. So yeah, I think that this is an issue. And let's actually look at a couple of hands where this has come up while we're on the subject. So we want to be looking for called pre-flop. We want you to be on the button. Button is 0. So these are all the hands where you called a raise on the button. And just looking at these hands, like I don't see a hand on here yet that you should really be calling a raise with. So calling a raise with ace-6 offsuit, king-jack offsuit, queen-8 suited. Queen 10 suited is like the most justifiable of any of the ones on this list. Oh, and pocket eights. That's a pretty clear one. But this is yeah, and there's just no reason to call this raise. This should just be a fold pre-flop, and then you do it, and then you fold to a continuation. That's going to happen a lot. Like, how many flops are you really going to continue on when you you're only going to flop a pair about a third of the time, and even when you do, like a pair of sixes is not going to do too much for you, or you're going to have top pair with a bad kicker. You just shouldn't be calling raises with hands like that. Even the king-jack offsuit, you've got an early position raise. I would probably just fold this. If I didn't fold it, I would 3-bet it. I think calling with it is the worst option. And so now you call. You've actually gotten a piece of the board, so pretty justifiable that you're going to call again. I would bet a little larger in this situation, but is what it is. I think checking back there is fine. Yeah, and that's part of the reason not to call a raise with king-jack offsuit is even when you hit, it can be tough to end up winning the pot. So there's some bad luck involved there, but you kind of set yourself up for that bad luck when you make that pre-flop call. This should definitely be a fold. This one, so you're pretty shallow here. You're only playing 40 big blinds. I think this is a more justifiable call if you have 100 big blinds behind. There's a little bit more room for you to use your position, but I still think this should probably just be a fold. Yeah, and once again, like you're giving up so often when you don't get a piece of the board. Yeah, that should be a fold. So fold the king 10 offsuit, fold the ace 5 suited, fold the ace 5 suited. Let's see how the pocket eights went. All right, so this is a justifiable call. As I said, pocket pairs are like the one sort of hand that you can justify doing this with. I like calling the flop. So the turn is sort of interesting. It is a bad card for you. It's worth asking is this player actually going to bet an ace if he has one? Some people will, check the turn and then bet the river if they actually have an ace. And I think you want to consider, what would you call a bet with here? I think that if you're calling his pre-flop raise, and I've mentioned the idea a few times that like the other type of hand you might be able to call a raise with is really good Broadway hands like ace queen or ace jack. Against this guy, I don't think I really want to three bet ace queen against his under the gun raises. His pre-flop raise is only 9%. So if I call him with ace queen pre-flop, I'm probably going to call a bet on the flop. And that's the sort of thing I have in mind when I say like you need to have a plan for facing a continuation bet. When I call a raise with ace queen, it's with the intention of continuing on a flop like this that doesn't really improve either player's range. So if I know that I have ace queen in my range when I get to the turn, I can feel a little more comfortable folding when he bets an ace. If I don't have a hand like ace queen in my range, then pocket eights is pretty much the best hand I'm going to have. I might actually consider calling that turn bet. I'm a little suspicious there just because I don't know that people necessarily bet an ace when they have it, and it is a good bluff card for him. So I'd be inclined to be a little suspicious. I think we're actually kind of saying the same thing here, where even when you did have a reasonable pre-flop call, you still gave up a bit easily after the flop. I might be giving this guy too much credit. This may be something that you actually know better than I do from playing a very small stakes, that people are just a lot more straightforward and they just bet when they have it and they aren't thinking in terms of like pot control or how to get paid off. So this might be an okay fold. I don't want to criticize this hand too much because I think this is actually a justifiable pre-flop call, but looking at all these other hands, I don't think you should really be calling with most of them. This one, definitely not king 10 offsuit. King 10 suited. Why is this showing? This is the one I want to look at. Yeah, I suppose this is justifiable. I think he's got a pretty low. So my first instinct here was to re-raise. I always think you should consider re-raising before you call. And I think if this player had, actually I'm looking at the wrong. So that's his stats. This is this villain. His pre-flop raise is 18. I would just three bet him here. I think that's probably better than calling. So he makes it 75. I would make it $2 or $2.25 and go from there. It's very similar to what I was saying about the small blind. Generally, if you think you have the best hand, you should probably three bet someone. That seems fine. So we want to be conscious now. There's a good chance that this player here has a spade draw. I also want to be worried that this player is still betting, even though he got called by two people on the flop. I would think, if you were this player, wouldn't you be concerned that somebody has a king if you bet this flop and get called by two different people? So I'm sort of suspicious now. I don't know that I want to play for stacks. I definitely don't think my hand is good enough to raise for value. So I think I'm just going to call now. And this also is a very bad river card. I think the villain should be kind of afraid now if he. So I mean, I guess I'm saying you should fold this. I think that you're really not beating anything, and you have to ask yourself why is he still betting? Like, the board has gotten so scary for him now with two kings on the board, with a flush coming in. I don't think there's any chance that he's overvaluing a hand worse than yours. Like, I don't think he thinks he has the nuts because he's holding ace queen. So I think you're beat here. Yeah. And again, like, this is the sort of thing that's going to happen when you call a raise with king 10 suited. Is you've got to be a little careful about it if you're going to make that call at all. Okay. Jack suited. Yeah, I guess this can be an okay call. This is a hand that'll play reasonably well multi-way. I still think you could justify, but you could make it like $3 here instead of calling. But I'm okay with calling this. Very good flop for you. You should definitely bet when checked too. I would probably raise if someone had bet, or at least float. So this is like an absolutely mandatory second barrel. You've got literally the best possible bluffing hand here. This guy, he didn't re-raise pre-flop, so he probably doesn't have pocket tens or aces or ace king. Ace queen or like maybe pocket twos is about all he could have in terms of strong hands. You should be putting more pressure on him when you have such a good draw. And now I think you actually have to fold. I don't think you're really beating anything. I don't think he's gonna. I think he has an ace very often. He's not gonna have clubs because you're holding two of the most important clubs. I'm kind of afraid you're going to call here just because you hit the king. No, okay, good fold. I'm glad to see that you folded this, but you really, really need to bet the turn. That's just so important. Like, because he can very easily have like a 10 here, or even a weak ace that you might be able to get him off of by betting 3 times. And the thing is, he's not going to raise you. I think it's extremely unlikely that you get raised, which means you're going to get to see the river card after you bet. And you have such a high chance of improving on the river that you really don't need him to fold much. I mean, maybe you're kind of surprised to hear me say that he might fold a small ace, and maybe he wouldn't. I mean, I know people at the small stakes are sort of loose, but even if there's a chance that he might, like maybe 2 out of every 10 of your opponents are going to fold an ace in this spot. But then there's also another 25% chance that he has a 10 and he's going to fold that. Those two things combined with the fact that you have the chance of improving your hand, I think all of that together is enough to make that bet profitable on the turn. So yeah, I mean, even in cases where you are involved in pots pre-flop, I think you may need to be a little bit more aggressive than you are now. The bottom line is just that you generally want to either be aggressive or not play a hand at all. So, calling pre-flop is not great. You're not going to do too much of that. And after the flop, you really want to be looking for excuses to play your hand aggressively rather than excuses to just check or call. The pocket pairs are generally going to be good calls. King 5 suited, Queen 10 offsuit, Queen Jack offsuit, Ace 9 offsuit. Those are not hands to call raises with. The 8-6 suited, maybe. Yeah, I don't think you want to call here. I think you should either re-raise or fold, and probably fold. But I think calling is the worst option. Same thing here. And yeah, with him being such a tight player, I think you just want to fold. You're not, what you can't try to do here, you can't try to play this like a pocket pair where you're gonna call and just try to flop 2 pair or something. And this is one of the reasons why calling. I mean, I at this point I would probably call again. You're getting 3.5 to 1, but one of the reasons why calling is not great is that you're not closing the action, and sometimes this is going to happen. Somebody's going to re-raise behind you. Ace Queen suited. Let's see what's happened here. Yeah, so I agree with this call. I think this is you're facing a big raise from an early position player. I think just calling here is fine, and I'm okay with that fold actually. I know in general I said you want to continue pretty often pre-flop, but this guy seems like he has a pretty strong range. Yeah, this should. I would definitely 3-bet this. I mean, look at this guy. He's VPIP of. Well, I guess he does have a pretty big gap between his pre-flop raise and his VPIP. Maybe just calling him is okay. I guess I'm okay with that call. Both players check to you. Probably want to bluff, even though you don't have much going on for your hand. You do have a backdoor straight draw, and I would think villain 41 is generally betting when he has something. And remember, we talked about how often you're going to miss flops and how you're just going to give up so often. The same thing is going to be true of your opponents. They're going to miss a lot of flops. So if they show you some weakness after the flop, it probably just means they have nothing, and you probably should try to take it away. You don't have to bet a lot here, 75 cents maybe. And now you get this turn card, you've picked up a straight draw, you can represent a flush. Nice time for you to bet again. I suppose calling the 50 cents is okay, but I would just so much rather be the aggressor in this hand, which you would be if you had just bet the flop. Okay, so once again facing a huge raise. Oh, I see. This is an all-in. Yeah, I think you should just go all in here yourself. You only have 30 some big blinds. This guy could be shoving a really, really wide range. Who knows what he's calling with? You should just be going all in here yourself. There's a lot of money already in the pot, and you probably have the best hand. Ace Queen suited is, I think, in pretty good shape against these two players' ranges, and you're not risking really that much relative to the pot. So I think that shoving is much better. If I didn't shove pre-flop, I would shove the flop rather than make the smaller bet. Certainly, you're committed to calling on the turn at that point. But yeah, so this is why you want to shove pre-flop. I mean, look, this guy has 5-3. This guy has 10-9. No matter what happens pre-flop, it's a good outcome for you. If you get this guy to fold 10-9, that's a great outcome for you. And if he calls with 10-9, that's a great outcome for you too. There's really just nothing can go wrong as a result of you sticking it in here. I think this is another instance of overly passive pre-flop play. I would three bet here. This guy's raising so much. Pre-flop raise of 37. When you see numbers that are that high, you should really be looking to attack people. So I would three bet him. Definitely want to continue on this flop. I would probably do it by raising rather than calling. And yeah, you are going to need to fold the turn. So, out of all of these hands, it seems like maybe only about 10% of them are actually calls that you should have made pre-flop. So I think calling way fewer raises on the button and basically only doing it with pocket pairs. I'm going to say the only hands that you should even consider calling with are pocket pairs, suited connectors, and suited Broadway hands. And in the case of the suited connector and the suited Broadway, you should seriously consider three betting. Basically, what I was doing was I was looking at the pre-flop raise statistic of the player who opened, and I was seeing how wide that guy opened. And if it seemed like he was opening really wide, then I want to three bet him. If he doesn't seem like he's opening really wide, then I'll call and play post flop. But we've really got to get rid of all this, the ace three suited, the king 10 offsuit, the 9-7 offsuit. I don't want to beat a dead horse or seem like I'm being mean about this, but I really want to emphasize like you absolutely cannot call raises with hands like this, and I think this is probably the single biggest leak that we're finding here, and it's the main reason why you're not winning more money on your button than you are, is because look how much money you're losing in these cases where you're calling pre-flop raises, and it leads to a lot of other mistakes, and it's a mistake. Okay, so it seems like you're only losing 75 cents at a time, but that's a lot. That's 3 big blinds per 100 every time you call and then fold to a bet. That really adds up, and then it adds to these other post flop problems as well. These cases where you call a flop continuation bet and then you fold, or you make top pair with a worse kicker than somebody and you don't win very much. This is a problem that really compounds itself. So I think calling fewer raises across the board, like these are not hands you should be calling raises with in any position, but you need to be even tighter from the other positions, but it seems like you were a little better about it in other positions, and I think you're just pushing it too much from the button. I think you're calling too many raises, and it seems like you're probably opening too many hands on the button as well. So tightening up right there, I think by itself is going to make a real big difference for you. So I wanted to look at some other filters as well. Let's clear this one out, and we'll see how you're doing. So these are pots where you were the player who made the 3-bet. Looks pretty good. We're showing you losing from middle position, but that's only over 8 hands, so it could easily be variance. Let's go ahead and have a look at that. So here you are in middle position, and yeah, mostly you just lost this one big pot. Let's see. Well, I was saying that I don't think ace-jack offsuit is necessarily a hand that you want to 3-bet against an early position open. So that could solve the problem right there if you just aren't 3-betting this hand. I do think it's better than calling though, so at least be glad that you didn't do that. Very nice flop for you. I would actually consider checking here. I know in general I've been telling you to be more aggressive. This is the sort of hand that, part of the reason I want to check here is the same reason why I don't like the pre-flop 3-bet, which is that when you hit an ace, I don't think you can really play it that strongly. Like if your opponent gives you action on this board, what can you really hope to beat? Maybe ace 10, right? You're losing to ace king, ace queen, ace 9, ace 8. Now, you're not way behind those hands because you have the jack of diamonds, but that's another part of the reason why I like checking. Your hand is not a hand that's really strong enough to bet for value, but it is a hand that is very difficult to draw out on. So if you do currently have the best hand, you have very little to gain by making your opponent fold. Your hand is not at all vulnerable. Like I would like betting a lot more here if you didn't have the jack of diamonds. If you had ace jack of hearts, I think there's much more of a case for betting. So yeah, now you get check raise. You'd have to call the check raise, but I really don't feel good about your hand at this point. I would just fold to this bet. So you're just chasing a flush at this point, and it's not even guaranteed to be the best flush. Like you could already be losing to king queen of diamonds. You could be up against ace king with the king of diamonds. I suppose now that you've rivered 2 pair, I guess you're going to call off the last $6, but yeah, this is why I don't like betting the flop. It's why I don't like calling the turn, because you could already be drawing dead to a hand like this. So again, like there is some bad luck involved here, but I mean, bad luck is a part of poker, and what you want to do is not get yourself into the situations where bad luck can really cost you a lot of money. So you're not three betting an early position raiser with ace jack offsuit, especially when you yourself are in middle position, is a pretty good start. So I would, I think, just don't three bet that hand. Other than that, this looks pretty good. I like that you're making money three betting out of the big blind. I guess we can look a bit at small blind three bets. So these all look like the right sorts of hands to be three betting out of the small blind. I guess what is jumping out at me is that we're not seeing very many pocket pairs in here. I'm pretty much only seeing ace king, ace queen, ace jack. I'm seeing a little bit of like jacks and tens. There's pocket kings. Now maybe you just didn't get dealt any of those hands, but I'm curious if you're calling raises out of the small blind with those hands. That's not really, you're probably better off three betting some of those. This all looks fine in terms of the hands that you're playing. I like seeing the king queen suited in there. I think it's much better to be three betting that than calling with it. Yeah, that looks all right. Let's see if it is the issue of calling. So, what kind of hands are you calling raises with in the small blind? Is this already showing just? Okay. Yeah, I don't like a lot of these calls from the small blind. I think king jack offsuit probably want to three bet or fold. Probably just fold, actually. I think this is a pretty tough hand to play out of position. Ace 3 suited should be a 3-bet or fold. King queen offsuit should generally be a 3-bet. I would probably fold it if I didn't 3-bet, though. Yeah, I guess this is an okay call, just because you're facing against a player with a higher preflop raise. I'd want to 3-bet him, but yeah, I mean, even this is pretty close between calling or folding, honestly. I think even just folding might be okay. And I notice you are losing money by or no, you're not losing money calling in the small blind, I guess. But pocket nines is a hand could quite possibly be good enough. Yeah, not okay. Against an early position raise, I don't want to 3-bet nines. That's a fine call. I think I want to 3-bet this one. Look, he's got a pre-flop raise of 20. His attempt to steal is 50, so he's really raising a lot from the button. I think if you're going to play this hand at all, you want to put the pressure on him. I think just calling and playing out of position, you're setting yourself up for that same problem of what are you going to do when you miss the flop? Right? If he bets that flop, you're just going to have to fold. Now you've turned an open-ended straight draw. You should probably bet, although I don't think he's folding too many better hands. If you're going to bet, I think you should bet bigger than that. I don't think this really accomplishes very much. He's not going to fold a pair for 77 cents. You should definitely follow up with a river bet at this point. And yeah, you made life pretty easy on him there. I think I would just fold that pre-flop or 3-bet at pre-flop, but not call with it. Jack 10 suited. I'm okay with that one. Ace 5 offsuit should be a fold pre-flop. Yeah, there's no reason to make this call. This is a very big mistake. Ace 2 offsuit, another one you should not be. Okay, that again should be definitively a fold. 9-7 offsuit, no reason to call that. That should be a fold. Yeah, you can't be if you're gonna play bad hands pre-flop at all, you have to be the one raising, and for the most part, you just shouldn't be playing them. Period. Like you can't just call and hope that you're gonna get a piece of the board, and that seems to be like a lot of what's happening here. I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but I really want to emphasize how much of a mistake that is. I honestly think that just there's definitely room to improve some of your post-flop play, but I honestly think that just getting a lot of this junk out of your pre-flop, especially your calling ranges. I do think that not, especially the button, it seems like you're raising too many hands, but mostly I think just getting a lot of this crap out of your pre-flop calling ranges is going to do a lot to to improve your results. You really just need to tighten up when you're facing a raise. You can't be calling nearly as often as you are. I think you want to be a little bit more aggressive. Like maybe the best 5 to 10% of hands that you're calling right now, you should be three betting, and then like the worst 70% of hands you're calling right now, you should just be folding. So you should be doing way less calling than you are now, replacing a little bit of it with three betting, replacing a lot of it with just folding. Are there other filters? No, I think that's good. So, I mean, this other stuff, like how often you're folding to continuation bets, I think a lot of this is just a function of, calling raises too much. So we've already said like middle position, I think you're calling a little bit too much, and so then you won't end up have weekends as often when you're facing continuation bets, and that'll make it a little easier for you to just fold when you're facing them. Seems generally fine. So I'm looking, this river call efficiency is kind of an interesting number. So this tells you how much, like basically what percentage of, so one is like break even here. If the call river efficiency is 1, that means that you're breaking even on your river calls. If it's less than 1, it means that you're losing money by calling the river, which it seems like you are a little bit on the button and middle position. You're paying off a little too much on the river when you beat. From big blind, it actually, this number is actually kind of too high. And you might say, well, what's the problem? Like if I'm doing a lot better than breaking even by calling on the river. What this suggests to me is that you may actually be folding too much on the river from the big blind, like that you're getting barreled out too easily by people who are just bluffing a lot. So that's something that's jumping out at me. I don't think there's anywhere near the biggest problem. I'm just kind of telling you what this number is. In general, it seems like you're calling a little too much, and this is probably a function of just having too many weekends in there from the get-go. So the button, the problem is not just that you're calling too much on the river, it's that you're calling too much everywhere, and so you're taking all these weekends to the river, and then you end up calling with some of them as well. So I've mentioned, I think that probably raising somewhat fewer hands from these positions means you won't have to fold the three bets quite as much. I do find it very surprising that you're actually folding to fewer three bets from out of position than you are in position. So I mean, it seems like you're opening and then calling three bets when you're out of position a lot more often than when you're in position, and that's not really how it should be. You should definitely be calling more in position than out of position. I also think that you should probably be four betting a little bit more on the button than you are when you have the best position at the table. Similar to what we've seen before, I think there are probably some hands that you're calling with that you shouldn't, and some of them might be better served as four bets rather than calls. I don't want to dwell too much on this because the first and biggest thing I want you to fix is just playing fewer hands pre-flop. The rest of this I don't want to dwell on until you fix that other problem. The last thing we'll do here is we'll look at this leak tracker, and that's good. This should come out to about an hour. Let's run this analysis for these hands. I want to see to what extent this kind of confirms some of the things that I've pointed out already. So we're not seeing any really glaring errors here. For the most part, you're falling within the green line. It is worth pointing out that you're definitely on the high end of the pre-flop raise, and so that's one of the things that I suggested was just tightening up a little bit from every position in terms of how often you raise. This is probably just noise. I don't mind seeing high aggression frequency. I'm okay with that. Fold the river bet I wouldn't sweat too much. It seems like there's some cases where you're folding too much and other ones where you're not folding enough. So don't worry about too much about that right now. I'm not worried about fold lines to steal. I did say attempt to steal a late position is probably on the high side, and we're seeing some confirmation of that here. Your one at showdown is very low. So you're not winning that often when you go to showdown. I think this is probably a function of you just starting with really weak hands. So there's a lot of times when you raise pre-flop and maybe you try to bluff the flop, and then if your opponent's still there, you end up just checking it down and losing. That's going to happen a lot. Like I think the best way of improving this number, well, maybe there's two things actually. I think one is going to be not playing as many weak hands pre-flop, and the other one is going to be being a little bit more aggressive post-flop, so that when you do have a hand they can't win at showdown, that the king jack of clubs that we looked at when there was the ace and the 10 and two clubs on the board, that's a great example of a hand that you didn't end up going to showdown there, but on the turn you had a hand with no showdown value, right? You're not going to win very often with king high, but a really great draw, and that's just like a textbook example where you should fire again. So I think that being a little bit more aggressive when you're in those good barreling spots will help to get this up as well, because you won't be going to showdown as often with those weak hands. One win saw flop is a little on the low side, and that again I think is a function of playing too many weak hands, and same thing here. Now let's look at this by position. So small blind, they're actually okay with your VPIP from the small blind. I do think you were calling. In particular, I think you were overcalling a little too much. It seemed like you kind of thought, well, if several people have called, then that's more reason for me to call from the small blind. And that's not necessarily true. It's true when you have a certain type of hand that plays well in a multi-way pot. Like if you have 10-8 suited, if under the gun raises and it's just heads up, I'm probably going to fold 10-8 suited. If under the gun raises and two people call, maybe I'll call with 10-8 suited from the small blind. But anyway, a hand like ace-2 offsuit or 9-6 offsuit, those just have to be folded no matter what. And the fact that more people are in the pot does not make it more profitable for you to play those hands. I think we've talked before that c-betting the flop a little bit more often could be good for you, but I also think that just not having as many weak hands, again, like if you raise fewer hands pre-flop, you fold some of those weaker hands, then you don't find yourself holding really bad hands on the flop quite as often, and you can be a little bit more comfortable betting knowing that you have at least a bit of equity. The rest of this looks okay. Yeah, the rest of that seems fine. From the big blind, I think we saw big blind was one of your more successful positions. Yeah, that pretty much all seems fine to me. Not a lot I want to go into detail there. Middle position, once again, I think just if you raise a little bit less, then you can c-bet the same hands you're already c-betting, but it'll be a higher percentage of your overall hands. Fold the flop continuation bet way too high, and this problem is caused by calling too many pre-flop raises, and then you end up holding a lot of weak hands on the flop. So just don't call as often pre-flop with hands that are going to have to fold the c-bet, and this number should come down on its own. The rest of that seems okay. Cutoff, looking pretty good so far. Yep, I'm fine with all of those from the cutoff. And yeah, like I said, button, we're finding VPIP is too high, preflop raise is too high. We sort of expected that. C-bet is a little too high again because you have too many weak hands in your range. Attempt to steal, that's the same thing we've already looked at, just opening too many pots from that spot. So yeah, listen, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do want to emphasize, so I mean this is what we looked at in terms of pre-flop opening ranges. Just putting up, you can pause these, I'm just showing these to you now so you can you have a convenient place in the video if you want to pause and look at these in more detail. You can do that. So that was early position, middle position, cutoff, and button. These are the hands that I think you should open if it folds to you. In terms of calling raises, it's it's a little bit position and player dependent and stack size dependent and size of the raise dependent, but just when in doubt, fold. That let me bottom line that. When in doubt, you should just fold. I think that the pocket pairs are the most defensible hands to call with, and beyond that, you shouldn't do it very often at all. You should not ever do it with ace 10 offsuit or worse. You should not ever do it with king jack offsuit or worse. You should not ever do it with unsuited cards. like a 9-7 offsuit, 9-8 offsuit, 10-9 offsuit. Just don't ever do it with those sorts of hands. You really can't afford to treat calling like a compromise. Like, well, I sort of like my hand, but I don't really want to re-raise with it. That kind of stuff, you just have to fold it. I think you're going to make a lot more money if you stop giving away these pre-flop bets and then stop putting yourself in these tough post-flop spots. I would be very curious to see after, if you play another month or two, put in another 5,000 to 10,000 hands. Really focusing on tightening up pre-flop. I think I'd be curious to see your results after that, but I think you're going to see a pretty significant improvement fixing that. Alrighty, everyone. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, and you're interested in having some custom videos made for yourself, you're interested in any other kind of poker coaching, or if you just want to read my blog, listen to my podcast, watch my videos on Tournament Poker Edge, the place to start for that is thinkingpoker.net, and this coaching page here is the best way to sign up for coaching with me. Hope to hear from you soon.